Hi everyone, thanks for clicking. This video is about the scientific perspective behind wearable personal exposure meters and detectors, and it's also being released in congruence with Safe Living Technologies' release of its new wearable detector. There's a lot of information out there regarding wearable RF technology and why no one has bothered to develop one beforehand. It's quite extensive, but most of which is they just didn't want to bother to do the work. Also because it has been supported time and time again that having a single point of measurement on your body is actually less accurate than having an external source for measurement. These reasons, although sound, are not beneficial at all to the community for those who are at risk of being at high levels of exposure or those at risk of health effects due to minimal exposure. And what about the individuals in the industry that might be being exposed to thermal levels and might not even be aware of it? An early detection system would really benefit those people. So in regards to this, we've actually already reviewed some papers on this, one of which was the assessment of the human body influence on exposure meters of electric field in indoor enclosures by Silvia de Miguel Bilbao et al. You can find the website. You can find that on our website down below, where they attempt to classify the effects of the angle of shadow on the body that depends on the dimensions of the indoor area for the effects on the device in the indoor enclosure. They use 2.4 gigahertz, which is the most common frequency in use. So how to avoid some of the effects of body shattering? When you stand between the source and your detector, your body will absorb and reflect the signal, and even in an enclosed area like a anechoic or reverb chamber, even on small power levels, if it was safe to stand inside, your body would change the actual measurement within inside the chamber. Therefore, how can you determine what kind of power you're being exposed to if you aren't measuring it properly? When studies simply use at least two exposure meters, such as the on-body calibration and processing for a combination of two RF personal exposure meters by Anro Theilens et al. He does a full design of the calibration and of a personal distributed exposure meter. They determined that multiple body antennas have a lower measurement uncertainty than existing on-body sensors. So Dr. Theilens et al., they actually did a full design and calibration of a personal exposure meter. They determined that having multiple on-body antennas actually helped to lower the measurement uncertainty more than existing on-body sensors. So they calibrated devices and measured in the same conditions, as well as performed a calculation simulation to support their findings. So they focused on the 900 megahertz band. So picking a particular frequency can help to narrow the scope and accuracy of your device, versus if you want to have a broadband measurement, you have to be aware of the fact that it will respond differently. Your antenna will respond differently at different frequencies. So that's another thing that people need to be aware of. They designed their test by placing these antennas on the front and back of the torso so as to be able to avoid the body shadow effect of the limbs. They did this for indoor, outdoor environments such as urban macrocell, indoor picocell, and outdoor indoor, and they reduced the complications of the calculations by studying it stochastically. So the body compensation can be calculated and compensated for during models. This means that overall exposures are higher than displayed values unless compensated for due to your presence during the measurement. One study, Assessment of RF EMF Exposure by Choi et al., determined that the value of this would be about 1.4 times the presented exposure values. So there's a magnitude of other issues with exposure meters to make them more accurate. One must be aware that of not only the frequency, but the pulse width as well. So the faster the pulses, the higher the sampling rate and frequency must be in order to be able to compensate and capture more of the pulses. Minimizing biases and uncertainties and compensating for the spatial and temporal variabilities is required. Correction factors to compensate for mechanical errors, design of hardware and software filters, entropy, and what we were actually attempting to discuss, body shadow effect all need to be compensated for. These biases can often be corrected for by knowing the multiplicative correction factors, the proper use and measurement protocols, so like holding the measurement device away from your body, pointing it at the potential source, that kind of thing. So also small sampling windows, long measurement durations, detection limits, calibration and temporal drift correction, and not to mention one must be aware of the temperature and humidity, crosstalk between other devices, and duty cycle sensitivity are potential issues for measurement as well. The results of studies on some of the PEM's accuracy can be found in Bolt's study posted below. There are a great many issues in real-world measurements that could lead to a higher measurement uncertainty, such as things like the TDMI, or time division multiple access, so base services. So when you're using your phone, you actually share a channel with a bunch of other phones in the same area, and you each only get to use it for a small period of time, but very rapidly, and you share it. So when there's a bunch of people on the network, it slows down because you get smaller and smaller pieces of that network. And this is just one of the many issues that Lauer et al. Found in their study. So why move forward with a wearable detector if there are so many measurement uncertainties? Well, a lot of them can be compensated for mathematically. Also, there is a big difference between a RF meter and an RF detector, one of which gives you a very specific number, the other gives you a range. This particular wearable detector is also meant to be a warning system. So if you have passed a threshold of safety of your own personal setting, you have the opportunity to have an early detection system and be able to do something about it. Not to mention the fact that it's a very discreet way to do it. You don't have to pull something out. So individuals who are perhaps out in public and have a sensitivity are able to use it discreetly and keep themselves in a lower exposure environment for their own health and safety. So if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please leave them below. Don't be afraid to have a discussion. And thank you so much for sticking with us. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.